My name is Sally Sarratt. I currently live in Washington, D.C. and am the senior co-pastor of Calvary Baptist Church.
Wonderful. So just to kind of get warmed up, tell us about like all the different places you've lived in your house
Yeah.
in your life, and like college, but just
Sure.
like the big block demographic.
Absolutely. So I like to sometimes say my path is a circuitous one, but I actually think it's maybe a spiral, if you will, like where I keep making big circles and coming back around to things. I grew up in South Carolina, in the upstate of South Carolina. Went to college in East Tennessee. So I actually went from a not really big town to even smaller town, a dry county where I went to college. But there was a place where actually I was encouraged to imagine being able to love God with my mind and it not just be an emotional thing. And so it just sort of opened a whole new world for me. From my time in college, I spent 2 years in New York doing social ministry programs with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. And so I was living in Washington Heights and working in the Hell's Kitchen area, the back street of the Port Authority bus terminal, and met people from all over the world, after school programs, ESL classes, a whole range of things. To say that my world exploded and opened up and turned upside down and right side up again is an understatement. And my 2 years there still continues to shape life. And so I originally thought that at that point in time I might head to seminary, and I realized that I need some time and space maybe to make a more circuitous journey, to make room for myself and gather some experiences, etc. So I actually ended up going to business school instead. I went to the University of Virginia. I lived in Charlottesville for a couple of years. So the events of Charlottesville in these last days certainly feel close, right? And then spent my summer at P&G and went to Cincinnati during the summer, and then went back and lived there. It's hard to believe now, but it was only 5 years. But it was a wonderful 5 years. I think I learned a lot of things along the way about like confidence and learning to trust self and various other pieces. I think it was ironic that in a lot of ways my faith journey sort of took off while I was in business school, of all places, as I was stretched and challenged, and who I was and how I was that person in the world started to come together in ways that hadn't yet made sense for me up to that point. I ended up leaving P&G to move back to Greenville, South Carolina, in part because I wanted to be closer to sort of family and support network at that point in time, and was single and had community in Cincinnati, but it felt partial, I guess, if you will. It's like needing to have people that you call whenever, And there, a lot of things happened. One, it's where I started more seriously considering the call, the journey back towards ministry. Very soon after, also met my wife, Maria, and that was a absolutely beautiful journey and a slow one too, because there were stories that we grew up with about whether or not you could be a person of faith and a person who loves someone of the same gender. And so there's much more to all of that as well. But she finished up divinity school and moved to Greenville, South Carolina. So there up until we came here to DC 2.5 years ago. And during that time was when I went to do my graduate theological studies down at Emory, at Candler, and spent time as a mental health chaplain, a behavioral health chaplain in a hospital, and various other things. Worked with a Unitarian congregation there for a time, focusing on pastoral care. And it was a beautiful gift to me too, as a place where I was celebrated as a person and minister and one who shared life with my wife. So all of those things like kind of have collected themselves to like allow me to sit here in this place now, serving this community and congregation alongside Maria, and seeing how we might reclaim, find some grounded space for, live into, like the good that Christianity has often struggled to actually live into and pursue in its history. So it's a daily challenge and invitation, and but it's a beautiful community, and it's wonderful to be here in this time and place.
So I ask a series of questions
Sure.
that have more to do with experience than theology. And so it's really this, the important stories of your life that become part of the project. That said, I want to start with a theological question.
Okay.
And then we'll get it out of the way.
Okay, get it out of the way. Yeah.
What is your concept of a higher power, or God, and what words do you use?
Yeah. I think most simply, well, this is a tough question, right? To find good words to be able to articulate it, but a fundamental oneness to all that is. Paul Tillich, I think, is the one that uses the ground of being. We recently met an artist in Puerto Rico. His name is Samuel Lind. And he has this image called Madre Tierra. It's of Mother Earth. And it's this Taino woman, like indigenous woman from Puerto Rico. And like the whole of being is in her like womb and in her body, like roots and water and like all of life. And so I recently described that in my sermon this past Sunday as an image of this deep like oneness or abiding spirit. So I don't think, to say it differently, I don't see God as a white man in the sky that's looking to bless or zap you. But rather like a profound presence, wisdom. Maybe Sophia is another good word. Start there at least.
What, as you look back on your life, what would you say was your earliest memory that you had faith?
Faith was having faith and being exposed to it were sort of maybe those are different. I was taken, exposed to, and went to church from the time I was born, right? I think it was around the age of 6 where, like, for the first time, all I think I knew at that point in time is that I wanted to be part of it. Like, I wanted to lean into it, to be part of it. I think what I understood about it wasn't particularly deep. I remember more poignantly a time in like the 9th grade where, I mean, it's not that unusual, I suppose, but went to camp with a group from school, and encountered people a person in particular, like who I thought just had faith, like her whole spirit and being and like groundedness was something that I was moved by. And so I got way more curious about it at that point in time and wanted to pursue this faith journey at the time. Now, it's changed a lot since those moments, for sure. Now I would say that faith is like more about questions and process and seeking and experience than it is about, I think one person said certainty is the opposite of faith. And that has resonated with me a lot. But yeah, so I think that first experience of faith and now is quite different, but they are still related to one another within my own story.
So if that was when you were first exposed to faith, at the camp experience, when do you think was the first time you felt you had a sense that you were in that yourself, whatever that means?
I think it was still during those like high school years for me. It was like the camp experience might have been the first part that sort of pricked open my curiosity or my engagement, interest, etc. But then it was something I like pursued in various ways. I don't ever like to actually claim that I have an old soul because I think there's some measure of arrogance to it, but I think that there was this sense within me almost in high school even of connectedness or calling or whatever else, although I had no idea what that meant and the possibilities that were open to me of expressing my faith or of any sense of vocation were really limited. For example, I said to my friends at a high school table, we were eating lunch one day, and I said, I think I feel like I want to be a pastor's wife. Like that was the limit of what I could imagine then. So that's,
And you are.
I am, exactly. And not only that, Maria had a very similar experience. She imagined that she wanted to be a pastor's wife as well. And so we laugh and say, well, here we go. We did it.
What do you, I want to ask about the different important spiritual experiences of your life. But let's just start with, what do you think was the first time? And the way I ask this question is, what was the first time in your life you feel like you had to or chose to rely upon God as you understand God?
You're really going to laugh when I answer this. I felt that a lot. I mentioned earlier that when I started business school was actually a time when my faith journey really kind of took off. Confidence was something that was a challenge for me along the way, but I had confidence in certain respects, like with regard to, I was like naturally talented with hand-eye coordination, could play sports and various other things, but I didn't think I had any sort of like intellectual or academic prowess necessarily or capability. Had a lot of doubt when it came to all of that. And so, but I ended up getting into business school at Darden at the University of Virginia, and I was quite honestly really intimidated by that. And I arrived, I had been a religion major at a really tiny little liberal arts college in East Tennessee. It was not known necessarily for its academic rigor. And I apologize, Kirsten, for anybody that sees that. But I was sitting next to an MIT engineer and another guy that had done his undergrad at Wharton and like had been working at Bain Consultant or something crazy like that. And I was completely intimidated by it all. And as a result, like I turned to my faith. It was like I sometimes describe it as in that, like sort of in language that you just used of like feeling a sense of like needing God, needing something beyond myself, needing, I don't know, like longing for this connection or a groundedness that could anchor me in the midst of my own uncertainty and challenge and being stretched. And so it really sort of took off during my years at business school, like just of something that had been something that I thought I should be doing more faithfully, but kind of beat myself up for not doing, like being more faithful to religious practices or whatever else. And in that moment, really from that point forward, was just a longing, like something that I did because I longed to, needed to, wanted to. It was no longer sort of this rote task or obligation, but just this connection, hunger. Yeah, those would be words I would use.
So, tell me about some of the most important spiritual experiences in your life.
In truth, like the summer when I met Maria, like the whole thing, like that summer was a spiritual experience, like quite poignantly so. Like I could literally go back and walk through it moment by moment. And like there's this very, this moment in the midst of that summer. At that time I was almost 33, had been single, had been living alone as an adult for quite some time. And I remember driving and I had sort of started to realize that this was something more profound than anything else I'd ever experienced. And I remember this moment driving along where it felt like a question of like, Sally, if love actually shows up in a sort of a package or in a person other than what you expected, would you really actually like walk away from it? Would you reject it because it wasn't somehow acceptable? And it felt like a holy question. Now it took a year and a half to answer it, I think. After that, in some ways, it took us a while to figure out how to walk towards life together, especially Marie was already pursuing vocation in a religious field, and I was headed that way, and had been for some time. I think other religious experiences, I think I am a big fan of Howard Thurman's work. And I had the chance to take a course on him at Emory with Luther Smith, who is like one of the leading scholars. Since he was retiring my final semester at Emory, but he did his dissertation on Thurman and then taught courses on Thurman for the rest of his life, and spent time with Thurman in the midst of doing his dissertation and everything else. And I name that just because I think in many ways that whole class and being introduced to Thurman as sort of a conversation partner for my own life was in some ways like a religious experience. I know that sounds a little bit odd to describe it as such. But this particular moment my professor walked in and read this letter that was published in the Atlanta newspaper during like the civil rights movement, and it was like this absolutely horrific op-ed piece that somebody had written to the journal, with like spewing hatred of black people, just absolutely ridiculously toxic. And then him like sort of drawing up on the board to it, like, where are the boundaries, where are the limits of who you think is part of God's creation, and then comparing that in some ways to what Thurman, like that Thurman was never ever willing to say that anybody was outside the bounds of oneness, of whom God might be able to imagine to love, etc. Like you can just, I can feel myself exactly where I was sitting kind of in that moment, like kind of trying to take it all in, because I'm like, nope, I'm drawing the line, that's it, I'm going to have to limit, like exclude that, and then be like, well, yeah. I think even as challenging as it is, like to draw a boundary where anyone is beyond like that edge of love, of experience, of transformation, of whatever you might call it, like yeah.
What other experiences have been critical in your life?
Yeah. I mean, can rewind in some ways to like sort of a moment in high school right before I headed off to college. It was also one of those camp experiences, but where I don't know, there's this experience of like calling or vocation, of feeling drawn. At that point in time, the language that I knew for it was like feeling called to be like a missionary of sorts. Now at this point in time, I would like very, very, very profoundly challenge like the whole missionary movement and all the of some of the difficulty of what that entails. But I think what I take away from it now is just this sense of connection, of calling in my own life, about there being some purpose for a greater good that was bigger than me. Would be another one. Another even was, Maria and I were dreaming about the possibility of pastoring, of getting to do something together, but not really seeing any examples to be able to imagine the possibility of it, really, with not really same-sex couples leading in congregations. But I can remember, like, where I was standing when I, like, found the job description, like, the day it was published. I was, like, in the corner of the hospital on the first floor right outside the meeting hall, and just sensing this really deep sense of resonance and connection. I don't know, like, some of those experiences where...
What was the ad for? What did it say?
It was for the pastor, they were ready to hire a pastor for the church. Like, it was a description of the congregation, but they wanted it to be bilingual was preferred. Co-pastors are welcome to apply. Calvary had been pretty transparent about like they had already ordained a transgender woman at that point in time. Like, so we knew like that, like where Calvary stood with regards to like the possibility of us being ministers. And it felt like a yes, like at least that we wanted to like offer ourselves and who we were to the process and the possibility. So,
is there a spiritual story connected to sexuality? Like, has that been part of your spiritual journey?
I mean, certainly over time. So, like my own story of sort of coming to understand my own sexuality, and I think everybody's is probably a little bit different, though there's a lot of resonance. So I can now like look back in my life and see ways in which I was probably like wasn't like that I was already having experiences of myself as different than sort of like your classic heterosexual female. Back towards my earliest memories. Like I cried to quit dancing when I was 6 and like only really wanted to ever play sports, not to be like overly categorizing or anything like that. That's not really the point. I just knew that I didn't exactly fit the mold of what like the little girl sort of wearing lace and dance shoes, right? Like, so I can now look back and see a lot of like the fingerprints all along the way. But there was in me like such a pleaser in some ways that I didn't have space to ask any of those, or not within me. It's not even necessarily that, I mean, that's not true. Like, of course, I was taking in those expectations from my environment and surroundings, right? Even though I don't necessarily remember people preaching against homosexuality when I was growing up or anything like that, I still took in the message about whether it was okay or not. So it wasn't until I got to New York, I talked about my 2 years there as a pretty transformational time, about whether I could, it was like the first place that I could imagine the possibility of being a person of faith and a person who like loved someone of the same gender. It was like the first place I had seen it, the first place I had seen queer people in church, period. Like, and a church that was like, this is good, you're wonderful, you're the beloved of God. That was back in 1996. So I mean, it's been a while ago now too. So I think sometimes I say that one of the reasons my own sort of vocational journey has made such a big, very big circuitous route is that I needed to like have some time to make room for myself. And so, yeah, I think if I were to describe like faith or my experience of God or all of that, it's almost like one that like has like just kept expanding. And in that expansion, I like found room for myself too. So I would say like my own like experience of so in particular, like it was really and truly like encounter with Maria that made it very clear to me that like, yes, this is love. Like I've never experienced it before, but I don't, at least for me, don't know how I would have arrived on that just like cognitively to be able to say like, I'm gay. Now I get that that's not the same as other people's story, but that's my own story.
And how did that affect you spiritually?
Yeah,
in
so
the moment when you knew that this was love?
In a lot of ways, it's almost like the whole, so this whole circuitous journey sort of came together at once. In that, like, I knew love. I had a far more profound sense of my own, like calling. Like I don't even think that. So now I'm in like sort of professional vocational ministry, but I think that like that longing, that vocation, like that calling, if you will, towards 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 people, towards questions of faith, what that journey, accessing wisdom, like all the different words you'd use for it. I think those things were happening kind of at the same time, and then they just all started to come together. Like, and it was like, these things don't make sense. They don't fit together. I don't know how, like, to live into to all of it, to the fullness of myself. And yet, yeah, it was, you get pricked alive by love too, right? Pricked open. Yeah, one of the very first things Maria ever declared to me even is like, you have a pastor's heart. So it was like this being seen and known in the fullness of self, which I think is part of what the whole point of faith and religious experience, like to this, to be fully human, to encounter other as fully human, and all that is as part of that. We recently took vacation to Puerto Rico as well, and quite honestly, much of that experience felt like religious experience, just like being fully present, fully human, recognizing, like when you're on an island, there's a way in which it invites you to recognize your smallness. Yeah, all of that is religious experience, I think, for me.
Tell me about a time you doubted your faith.
Oh boy. So, so I like, as I think I was talking a little bit of, like faith became something that was important to me in high school, like pursued it in college, like was a religion major, ended up minoring in religion too, like it was like this particular piece within it. Like I was just like kind of eating it up. Like I was hungry and curious, etc. Well, then, like, I moved to New York. I'm doing this 2-year sort of social ministry program where I'm like giving of myself and in theory for religious reasons. I mean, not in theory, for religious reasons, etc. And it was a time also where I felt like like nothing within me really could sense God, or where God might be in the midst of it all. Like language that I might use in the midst of that, or that some have used that has resonated some, would be like dark night of the soul, like where feel as though you're going through the motions and doing some of the things that have been places of connection for you, but now just feel like hollow and empty and aren't. And honestly is one of the reasons why I think I ended up taking a long journey around that I'm so incredibly thankful for, but also a serious time of doubt as well. Like, this thing that I thought that faith was, I don't even know how to like access or experience or encounter or grasp or I mean, I can look back on it and see it as a time of like profound importance and growth and all of that, but at the time it felt a lot like absence, like just disconnection. And so I think I doubted all of it, especially during those times.
What do you think was going on for you?
Now, fundamentally, I think like the bounds of what I thought faith was were just breaking open, like really profoundly. I think kind of an earth metaphor is almost like it's in the winter when it's in the darkness. It's in those moments where something new or something more expansive is forming, but the old shell's got to go. So I think it was, making room for self, making room for imagining a faith that was much broader, bigger, wider, inclusive. Yeah. But I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was like somehow failing at the work I was doing, very much so in those moments.
Did you take some action, or did you?
Yeah.
How did it resolve itself for you?
Yeah. So, a person I haven't talked about is I have a mentor from college who I still keep up with. I literally talked to him yesterday. His name is Ross Brummett, and was just like really invested in my development as a person of faith, but just as a person, like. And so, as I did many times during challenging places, just talked to him very honestly about what it felt like. And college had kind of been a time where I like really engaged in this notion of loving God with my mind, but it just felt like it all was really disconnected. And he actually encouraged me to read the Psalms. As you may know, like the psalmists are this place in the Bible where the full range of human emotion and experiences is just really laid out there. And it's not just a sunny version of faith, like a good huge portion of them are psalms of like lament and despair and various other things. And just, so what if you just let those be your prayers for a while? And just take off some of the pressure and just sort of see where it takes you. Because I think sometimes with our faith, we think it has to only be like the sunny parts, or we only bring the, I think that Barbara Brown Taylor wrote a book about learning to walk in the dark, but she talks about like this bright, sunny Christianity, like where it's a party all the time, and I think just an important thing was just making room for the fullness of human like experience, encounter, emotion, like being able to ask questions, to like even rail your fist at God in some ways, and that being okay, not gonna break faith or something like that. There's an act of faith, and not, I think that just opened up space that I didn't know that I needed, but it was like kind of a lifeline, if you will. And like it's not that far between that moment and when I entered business school, and sort of it just all, like 2 years later, it's all coming back together in a way that I didn't know it could be woven. No.
Would have been a good time for us to expose you to Judaism. Would have dragged you.
Yeah, I know.
Because we get to argue it with God.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and so like so much of, quite honestly, I had done a lot of religious studies in my undergraduate that was really kind of a mini seminary degree. So when I got to go to Emory, like I was taking all I could on the world's religious traditions. Like I have a lot of holy envy for like Judaism and the Jewish tradition. Hinduism is another one that just really like or the practice is like, there are many traditions within Hinduism, obviously, but like the way that the many and the one is held together is like something that it's like this deep yes, right? Like that I sense within myself, and so then I admire the work of Diana Eck too, who like will encourage has I don't know, just showed me in some ways how beautiful the dialogue among faith traditions can be. Like obviously, like in practice, like there's a lot of like ideological conflict that I find despairing, right? But like the actual religious experience that is that the dialogue and the conversations that are available there just can be such an invitation to kind of, I think, what I describe or tried to describe as this notion of God in the first place, or the ground of all being. I think sort of reducing their religious traditions to like the least common denominator really I worry a little about. Like I think that there is so much like profound depth and wisdom that if we're willing to go to the other side of complexity, the oneness that we'll find there is just earth-shattering is the word that comes to mind. Yeah.
What are you most grateful for?
Wow. I am most grateful for I think the chance to like be human, like encounter myself as such, and to encounter others as such. I mean, trying to find words to actually articulate this sense of I'm grateful for the chance to experience the fullness of life, both within me and in relation to others, that is not over and against like the created world, but is like a part of it. And the more particular that connection or experience is, I think the more full. So said differently, I am most grateful for the chance to share life with Maria, the chance to know and encounter the community here too. Like, I think it's maybe almost 15 years now since we probably last talked, but to like, for humanity to still connect and encounter one another. One of the stories within the Christian tradition that I think is really compelling is this notion of Pentecost, when the Spirit comes and breaks down all the walls, and then there's this connection. Willie Jennings describes Pentecost as like the revolution of the intimate. So that notion, I think, is in some ways what I'm trying to articulate, that I experience within my own life. And experience in relation to other people. And yeah.
What's your greatest wish?
My greatest wish. I think that my greatest wish is that if we can actually encounter one another in the fullness of ourselves, there might actually be healing that that we desperately long for. And so how do we make that journey? ourselves so that we can be present to that experience and healing, to use a word that you were offering earlier. Yeah, and I think that if we actually know and love and experience one another, in that way, it will be transformative, healing.
Do you have a message?
Do I have a message? My message is probably something along the lines of like that the journey we make in this life is both a deeply inward one and a deeply outward one, and they're profoundly related to one another. And the more that we do the work on both fronts, the more whole and human both we and our like encounters of community and life will be. And my own religious experience informs that story. I think many of the world's religious traditions describe that story. I think, truthfully, like human psychology also is one of the partners in that story. So much of the world truly is.
What would you like people to know about you when they see your portrait?
I think I would like people to know that I see life as like a gift, as something beautiful, something to be present to, and not something that is absent of pain, but something that is deeply connected in every possible way. And it takes some both quiet and space to encounter that, and it takes some like vulnerability and willingness to be present and human with others for us to experience that as well.
Sally, thanks so much.
Yeah.
It's a great blessing to be with you.
Thank you. It's
after all
wonderful
these years.
to be with you too.